What are we to do in this world? This, to my mind, translates as what is the meaning of life? What is the purpose of my life? It is a moral and philosophical question. What are we to do? Suggests some kind of moral dilemma, that we are given a range of options and we don't quite know which one to choose. What would help us choose correctly, properly, and with a consequence that is in our own interest? Well, we don't know. There are many competing narratives about what it is we should do, and it hinges on our belief system, whether we believe in God and the afterlife, or we think that this life is the be all and end all, and there's nothing more to hope for other than to enjoy the pleasures of life and to avoid death. This is a question. What are we to do in this world? This was taken out of Paul van der Clay's, one of his videos, and I would say that he's quite a skilled YouTuber. He's a Calvinist pastor. And what I've noticed, was it yesterday or the day before, was that I have become clickbait to myself. And so, if you go to Paul van der Clay's latest video for members, you'll find that I'm there, and obviously he's going to be mocking me for getting booted out of this stream by these Christians who drive me crazy. And they say, well, if you don't like us, why don't you just not come and hate watch us? And, well, it's easier said than done, considering Christianity is still the biggest and most powerful religious group in the world, even though they can't agree on anything other than to agree to disagree and further splinter and use new words to give evidence of their ever splintering condition. And this is obviously not how religion is meant to be. And what I'm trying to say to Americans in particular, because I have become very concerned about them and their First Amendment. And the more I talk to them, I've noticed this terrible tendency to do not care about the First Amendment. And I keep saying to them, and you may already have heard me say this since, if you're a regular listener, that the First Amendment is not going to protect you if you do not protect it. And it's certainly not going to protect you if you don't even notice that it has been infringed. But why do I, a non-American, care so much about the First Amendment? It is because I think it's really the most important and best thing about what we consider to be the West. Though we must not deny the Christian history of the West. There are so many things that are not put correctly. And would it be correct of me to say I despair of historians who get things wrong? No, I suspect they are court historians who don't mind taking a few liberties with the truth in order to please their paymasters. One of whom is Tom Holland, who makes a point of conflating Christianity with liberalism. Now, before I carry on, I have to return to the subject of this title about what we should do for the best, or as Paul van der Klee says, what are we to do in this world? And I mentioned Paul van der Klee because in his members only video, he has used me as clickbait, and I am wondering, I am in a dilemma as to whether I should be clickbaited by myself to listen to his clickbait video about me, doubtless mocking me for my attempt to tell Americans that their First Amendment is in mortal danger of Christian nationalism. Now, I know Paul van der Klee is not a proponent of Christian nationalism. In fact, he thinks the whole thing is stupid. But he knows that it is an idea being touted on social media by this pair of social media influencers who are Doug Wilson, who calls himself a Christian nationalist, who says reassuringly that he has no plans to restrict the rights of Muslims and atheists at the moment, for now. Something like that. And he and Doug Wilson are having a conversation that is regularly being featured on YouTube in a kind of, I suppose you could call it a Claire and Vincent like pairing. So those of you who watch me regularly would know that I am in a constant dialogue with Vincent Bruno, who is against everything I stand for. So while I propose to restore the patriarchy, he wants to think of any alternative possible, however silly, to try all the wrong ways in order to avoid the truth, logic, and morality of my solution of secular Quranism. So, but it's helpful in making the point of contrasting opposite positions. So this is basically the Sam Harris and Doug Wilson debate. And I noticed that Paul van der Klee was saying, well, I could have done better than Doug Wilson. And if I were Doug Wilson, I would have said this or that. No, of course, he wasn't crude enough to say that, but this is what I detect reading between the lines. I think there's all to play for in being its social media influencers, even if some are clearly being promoted over ourselves and we are clearly being suppressed by the algorithms. I am aware that CIA operatives are embedded within social media platforms, and basically social media platforms have to submit to the demands of the CIA, and that is why It's always opaque, and the CIA also changes its mind, like a capricious and emotional woman. So we never really know what we're allowed to say. And having watched um, the outro of Millennial, I haven't finished watching it yet, but basically, Millennial Woes was saying that he didn't think he was saying anything particularly outrageous, and he thought that if he hadn't said certain words or taken a certain position at a time, his YouTube channel would still be around, and he would be coining it more than he was before. And it is true that we don't really know what we're allowed to say from one moment to the next. And although Elon Musk said he would be completely transparent about what we are allowed to say and what we aren't allowed to say on X, I think he has had to submit to CIA operatives working within X. So perhaps I should really be addressing my message to the CIA, since they are the boss, since they control the fourth estate. And perhaps it is really what I should do in this world, to work out who is in charge and speak to them directly, since we have all these mediums of, I should say, media of information and communication to get the message through. Vincent often tells me that no one is going to adopt secular Quranism because they are all they're all sex offenders, and they don't want to come to terms with their sexual offences, and therefore they won't be even thinking about repenting or discussing how raising standards of sexual behaviour would benefit them. But I really don't see the problem, since when we think about the bargain of the Abrahamic God, repentance is an option anytime up to death. The only problem would be if you are not in a position to remedy the harm that you caused, or your victim won't forgive you, or you're not really sincere. But if you're really sincere and you would really wish to make amends and correct yourself, then there is no time before you die that is too late, provided you satisfy certain conditions. So I'm saying it's not that hard to make the arguments for restoring the patriarchy, since we are all of us, male or female, and would like to think well of ourselves in this life and the next, if it exists. So what I am to do in this world is simply to make these points in a way that is easily understood, easy to repeat, and attractive to sinners. So there you are. I think I've said all I need to say about what it is I should be doing in this world, and what others who support my undertaking to protect the First Amendment from Americans. This is the ultimate irony of it all. The First Amendment can only be protected by Americans and only be abolished by Americans. And they don't care. Why don't they care? Because most of them are, well, a bit stupid. Let's just acknowledge that. I'm not going to mince my words. I've endlessly used this analogy of, well, the rules, even the most perfect set of rules, are useless if you won't follow them, and they won't even be worth the piece of paper they're written on if you don't follow them. So there is no point buying a recipe book or buying a map if you won't follow either. And if you end up lost, or your cooking is crap, but you never consulted the map or followed the recipe, then it's not the fault of the map or the recipe that no one eats your cooking. I really don't know how much simpler I can put it. But going back to the subject of Christians, I know they have a particular fear and loathing of me because they sense that I am threatening to the Trinity, and this means that they will try to keep me at arm's length. They will try to talk over me, and what they have, their strategy, not just towards me, but to anyone. I've seen them at Speaker's Corner. Is they stand on their soapbox and they just talk, and they never answer questions. And if sometimes they pretend to answer your question, they would quote long, irrelevant parts of the New Testament at you until you lose the will to wait your turn to speak. And then you disengage, and they think they've won. And that's why I keep telling Jews and Muslims to always start the dialogue with accusing them of idolatry. Ask them, if you haven't already asked the Pope, Archbishop of Canterbury, or the British monarch, how Christianity is not idolatry. You invite them to speak. You invite them to answer your question about how Christianity is not idolatry. That's always such a conversation starter. But you will find that these Christians, who are usually so loquacious, will start looking at their shoes and shuffle away out of the room when you ask them this question. And I think you all have to join me in making the point again and again and again. And it would help if you wrote to the Pope and asked him how Christianity is not idolatry and how Jesus is God. And you ask this of, well, any bishop, any pastor, the Archbishop of Canterbury, any Christian monarch, any clergyman in your Lutheran church or Anglican church or your Dutch Reformed church. You keep asking them. This is really the only way to do it. This is the only way to make the penny drop. Why do I care about the First Amendment not being an American? Well, I'm in Europe. The Europeans don't have the First Amendment. They clearly have fewer rights than the Americans. And as for the colonials in Australia, in Canada, in New Zealand, they have even fewer rights. And this perhaps explains why they are now being over-promoted. There are plenty of people who could do the Jordan Peterson gig, such as Paul Van der Clay. He would be much better than Jordan Peterson. So I get the impression that a lot of mediocrities are being promoted because they would be perfect gatekeepers, because their mediocrity, their desire to keep pandering to their brain dead audience will stop them from entertaining new ideas, because they would fear their viewers unsubscribing and not liking and not sharing their videos, and their income will be affected. I am proud to be completely unmonetized, so I can say what I believe to be the truth, which is, I think one of the ways I manage to stay sane. I mean, if you listen to the Christians, they are just full of they are full of hot air. They are gas bags. They are hot air balloonists. They say nothing. And they don't intend to say anything in case it gets them into trouble. They don't even dare to discuss Nick Fuentes. It's too cringe to talk about Nick Fuentes in case they say the wrong word and take the wrong position. They would rather leave it to the Jews to discuss Nick Fuentes. And this is really interesting when you think of the top echelons of society and the ones bumping along at the bottom. Obviously, Jews think they have every right to discuss Nick Fuentes, being God's chosen people and the target of the challenges of Nick Fuentes. And of course, those at the bottom, they have nothing more to lose. So they would be white nationalists and proud anti-Semites and Islamophobes. It's the ones in the middle that fear being cancelled, either socially or in employment terms. It's the middle classes, basically, who are the problem. They possess the education to challenge the established order, but they refuse because, to a man, they are atheists. They don't even know. They don't even know that they're supposed to have principles and defend them. So the other day I was talking to Neil Daedalus, who was the one who kicked me, actually. He's a bright young man, obviously quite skilled at editing and singing and whatnot. But if you want to have an experience of Christian prevarication, then you should go and have a good listen to him. So what he does is he asks irrelevant questions. I can't remember how it went, but yes, go to his video talking about the generation gap, and I thought, oh hey, generation gap, this is just a topic. We were going to talk about boomers and zoomers, aren't we? And it turned out that they weren't. And by the end of the second hour, I was having also listened to a whole other bunch of Christian channels who, they don't say anything. They just want to be nice to each other and really only pretend to talk about things that people might want to talk about, but make sure that no resolution is ever reached. Never. And this is the point of their pointless videos and pointless conversations. So what was Neil Titler say? Oh yes, it was just so obviously absurd. I can't even remember what I was saying when he said, "What are you going to say to little Johnny in Victorian times about?" And that was when I lost my rag, really. So, so I said what I wanted to say, and surprise, surprise, I was booted out. But the thing is, I did have a previous conversation, and this is what they always do. They kind of get you say a few sentences, and then they talk and they talk and they talk and they talk. So you can imagine, an hour video, and you're only allowed to say talk for 1 minute, and they just talk and quote and cite the New Testament, a whole chapter of it, and then unless you're going to be rude, which means you'll get booted, you're not going to be able to get a word in edgeways, and whatever point you make, they will pretend that they didn't understand, or in fact, they never really understood it because they're not listening. They're waiting to quote some crap at you, to make sure that their crap dominates the entire length of the exchange. And another ridiculous thing that I heard them say is that they have to trust me. They have to trust me in order to not talk over me. Why? As long as you can understand me, you can contradict me if you think I've got something wrong, or said something illogical, or said something immoral. There's no need to trust me. Why the fuck should you feel you have to trust me? It's a typical Christo crap that they keep excreting, really. And not only do they waste my time, they waste their own time. Life is finite. Problems need to be solved. Streaming is not an endless series of group therapy, is it? So if you think there's a problem, you should talk about it honestly. And if you don't feel happy showing your face or giving your real name, then don't give your real name. Don't show your ugly fucking face. But at least have a proper conversation. So what are we to do in this world? I think it would help enormously with our mental health issues if we spoke the truth as we see it. We may be wrong, but then if we said what we thought honestly, we might benefit from correction. Isn't that the whole point of telling the difference between falsehood and truth? So what are we to do in this world as YouTubers? Some people just want to derive an income, and this means carrying on with the propaganda, with the lies, with the idiotic positions that you are expected to take, which will be reversed a bit later on. Some of you may be very pleased to note that a few social media influencers like Benjamin Boyce are basically saying, yeah, it's okay now. You can go right ahead and be racist and anti-Semitic and ask about the USS Liberty. And they are gatekeepers and they are opening the gate. But it could all be closed again, and the cattle who got in through the gate might be penned in and repurposed or punished for whatever reason the powers that be see fit. Some of you may have heard of Mao's 100 Flowers campaign. That was when he said, "Oh, I'm not perfect. I might have got a few things wrong. Oh, Chinese people, would you like to tell me what's on your mind?" And they did, and they were punished. So, operating under this environment, what in the world are we to do? I still think we should speak the truth as we see it and and see where it takes us. And of course, be open to correction. What form does correction take? It would be when what you think is information turns out to be incorrect. It would be when the conclusions you have come to as a result of information received turns out to be illogical or immoral. And then you correct yourself. What's so hard about that? So, back to the subject of what we are to do in this world. It depends on how much you value your honor, your peace of mind, your afterlife, if you believe in that sort of thing. It's actually quite easy to make a very sound case for the government making those who believe in God and the afterlife mainstream, because all it needs to do is to say, this is how we're going to be from now on. We all have leaders of our nations, don't we? But if you think that these people who get to be leader of your Western nation are not what they could be, what they should be, what could you do? Well, you could question the system and then you would be identified as some kind of heretic or revolutionary. I see Conops is one of those people. I have learned quite a lot from him. He thinks he's part of the establishment now, and he has to talk and think as a member of the establishment does. He has to support the war in Ukraine. He has to be pro EU, but he's kind of allowed to be Islamophobic. He can mock the Jews gently only, but won't be questioning Zionism or the state of Israel as it is now. It's not that hard to work out what certain people are allowed to say and what most people are not allowed to say. And obviously, if you've had a university education, you are better equipped to dance around words and the great unwashed. Obviously, it helps to be legally trained, as I am, and it also helps to have some knowledge of theology and history and politics. But the great lesson that ConOps taught me was how easily manipulated these middle classes are. So it was after the stolen election that we're now allowed to discuss, because it's retreated into history, the stolen election of 2020. I know that ConOps supported Trump, so obviously he was disappointed to see Trump's election snatched out blatantly from under his feet. But he was fed a narrative that he was quite happy to accept, and the narrative was that there was some fraud, but not enough to swing the election. And that was enough to settle the minds of people like ConOps and Jay Walker. They were happy with that. I mean, obviously they're not, moral or political leaders because of their mindset. They are snobs, they are nihilists, and really cannot be trusted to stick to any position because they have no convictions. You see, to have no convictions is to be cattle, because it means you have no principles, and if you have no principles, then you can only be moved by carrot and stick like a donkey. So what are we to do in this world? Social media influencers, or aspiring ones, should aspire to speak the truth as they see it, and a sign of virtue would be to submit to correction when they are proven wrong. How can they be proven wrong when the premise of their belief is provably incorrect, when their logic is unsound, or their proposal clearly immoral? It's so easy. It's so easy when you know how. Now, as regards Christians who have their endless group therapy sessions, they're not political discussions, they're just attempts to prove that they have friends beyond their, the people they know in their real life. In real life, I mean, probably they don't even have that, because one of the things I said to them was that, don't you have any people in real life that you are supposed to bite your tongue with? You, okay, if you don't want to offend, members of your family or friendship circle, yes, you can agree to disagree and not talk about these things, and you're nice to them, and you appear to agree with them or refuse to challenge them. But when you go online, what is the purpose of that? The purpose of, if you want to go online to have conversations, is to have real conversations and not have fake friendships and fake conversations that never get anywhere, that are really only a display of status, I guess, if you're a YouTuber who has more subscribers or more live viewers, and that's how they do it. I don't think that you're morally virtuous just because you have a bigger YouTube channel than me. Most people are morally rotten, and most people promote nonsense and lies. The BBC, for one. So there is currently no acceptable measure of virtue, but I intend to talk about imposing one. Yes, impose, because if it can be objectively ascertained about the truth of something, then, and truth is what's not in dispute, isn't it? Truth is what is not in dispute. Sound arguments are logical arguments about facts that are not in dispute. And morality, that's the next one. The next one is morality, and the big words of philosophy such as justice, objectivity, virtue, the national interest, the long-term national interest. Yes, we could be talking about that, but only the virtuous would show any interest in what I propose. So I guess we'll be quite an exclusive club.